The smell was unbearable. Officers gagged as they stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The floor was buried under rotting trash, crawling with insects. But the worst part wasn't the filth, it was the silence. Then, a faint rustling. In a corner, a 3-year-old girl sat motionless, her eyes blank, her tiny body covered in dirt. Nearby, a 5-month-old baby lay beside something that made the officer's blood run cold, a dead dog. But the nightmare had only begun. As they forced open a door upstairs, what they found was something straight out of a horror movie. Hey everyone, welcome to Crime Investigation. If you're here, you're probably as obsessed with true crime as we are. We dive deep into the most disturbing real-life cases, uncovering the details that others won't. From shocking crime scenes to mind-blowing twists, we break it all down, piece by piece. Tonight, we're taking you inside one of the most horrifying child neglect cases ever recorded. A mother hiding unspeakable secrets, a house filled with darkness, and an investigation that shook an entire community. Let's get into it. In 2014, one of the worst cases of child abuse and neglect was discovered in modern history. The situation came to light on August 28th, when a 10-year-old boy asked his friend's mother for help, worried about a crying baby at his home. Concerned by the boy's indication that no adults were supervising, the neighbor decided to check on the situation. What she found was horrific. The house was in a devastating state with an overwhelming smell, cockroach infestation, and garbage everywhere. Human waste covered both floors and furniture. She discovered 2 young children, a 3-year-old girl and a 5-month-old baby. The shocking conditions prompted her to immediately contact law enforcement. Upon entering Erika Murray and Raymond Rivera's home, investigators were immediately overwhelmed by a horrific smell. The house was severely neglected, with flies and maggots infesting the air, and floors completely covered in garbage that made walking difficult. The kitchen was in disarray, with dirty dishes piled high in the sink. The upstairs area resembled a garbage dump, with trash stacked from floor to ceiling. One bedroom was so filled with debris that officers couldn't even open the door fully. What they could see through the small opening was shocking. Human feces smeared on the walls. Upon entering the home, officers discovered 2 children living in horrific conditions. A 3-year-old girl was found lying still on sheets soaked with urine, her body filthy with dirt and human waste. In a separate room, they found a 5-month-old baby wearing nothing but a dirty diaper next to a dead dog. The appalling conditions made it clear to investigators that these children weren't simply neglected. They were deliberately subjected to severe abuse and deprivation. During a welfare check, officials found no sign of the children's mother, who had been gone since early morning. Upon her return at 4 p.m., she seemed unconcerned when officers confronted her about leaving her children alone for hours. She offered no explanation and showed no remorse when reminded that leaving young children unsupervised is dangerous. The Department of Children and Families took custody of her 4 children, who ranged from 5 months to 13 years old. Throughout this process, the mother remained emotionally distant, sitting outside her house and watching quietly as her children were taken away. Rather than showing concern for her children or trying to keep them, she only asked about her missing cat. Her behavior suggested she had no emotional attachment to her children. After being arrested and taken to the police station for questioning, investigators were struck by the woman's unusually calm behavior. She showed no signs of distress about her arrest, the condition of her home, or her children being taken away. Instead of appearing ashamed or afraid like most suspects, she answered questions openly and directly. The most disturbing revelations came when she discussed her 2 youngest children. She confessed that she had given birth to both the 3-year-old and 5-month-old in complete secrecy, managing to hide the pregnancies even from her longtime partner who lived with her. When investigators asked about her motives, she explained with disturbing casualness that she felt embarrassed and concerned about their financial ability to support more children. Since she and Rivera had agreed not to have more children after their first 2, she chose to hide the subsequent pregnancies and births from both him and their older children. The woman imprisoned her 2 youngest children in different bedrooms upstairs, completely isolating them from the rest of the family. She denied them medical attention and prevented any social interactions that were essential for their growth and development. The fact that she managed to hide the existence of these 2 children for years was deeply troubling, raising serious questions about her mental health and the extent of her deceptive behavior. During their investigation, authorities discovered clear signs that the children had been intentionally cut off from the outside world. The youngest children were found in squalid, uninhabitable rooms that lacked basic necessities. No toys, cribs, or any items normally present in a child's room. The environment made it clear these children had never experienced normal family life. Instead, they were treated as if they were invisible. Medical examinations revealed the depth of the neglect. The 3-year-old had never seen a doctor or received any vaccinations or medical care. The interrogation uncovered disturbing revelations that strengthened the prosecution's position against the mother. Her confession that she concealed her children simply due to embarrassment eliminated any possible claim of acting unconsciously. According to prosecutors, her actions showed a clear and intentional disregard for her children's lives. Perhaps most unsettling was how she had successfully hidden 2 children from her long-term partner while living under the same roof, raising serious concerns about the extent and complexity of her deception. Law enforcement investigated Rivera's connection to the case and questioned his claims of being unaware of the concealed children. They found it hard to accept that someone living in the same house could be completely oblivious to the situation. Investigators tracked his daily routines and behavior to determine if he had deliberately overlooked signs of neglect or if he had been genuinely misled. Although Rivera stated he primarily stayed in the basement and wasn't involved in household activities, investigators remained skeptical of his innocence. The investigation revealed severe neglect and highlighted major failures in the system that let the abuse continue unnoticed for years. When officials reviewed previous records, they discovered that 2 years earlier, someone had reported animal neglect at the home, resulting in the removal of a malnourished dog. Unfortunately, officials never conducted a thorough inspection of the living conditions at that time. Investigators believe that if they had performed a more complete home inspection during the animal welfare check, they could have discovered and stopped the children's abuse much earlier. As investigators prepared for the court case, they uncovered increasingly disturbing evidence. Beyond simply hiding her children, the mother's actions revealed a deliberate pattern of neglect. Prosecutors sought to demonstrate that she intentionally kept her children concealed while denying them food, shelter, and other basic needs. When the trial began, even more horrific details emerged about the terrible conditions these children were forced to live in. During the investigation, detectives discovered a pattern of lies and manipulation by Erika Murray. She had carefully hidden the existence of her youngest children by claiming she was only their babysitter, not their mother. To make this story believable, she created a fake person called Michelle Ridgway, complete with a fabricated Facebook profile, who she claimed was the children's real mother. Her deception was so thorough that even her own older children were convinced, and they told police that the 2 younger girls were not part of their family. The scale of Murray's deception raised serious concerns about her mental health and motives. While some people experience hidden pregnancies or intense psychological denial, these usually occur as one-time events, not repeated incidents. Sometimes, trauma or shock can cause people to temporarily block out the reality of giving birth. However, Murray's behavior was far more calculated. She concealed 2 pregnancies, kept the children completely isolated from society, and created elaborate lies to keep their existence secret. Rather than reaching out for help from social services, she deliberately kept her children hidden, suggesting her actions were planned and purposeful, rather than the result of temporary mental distress. On September 3, 2014, she and Rivera attended a meeting with Department of Children and Families staff. During this meeting, she provided each child's birth date, but her way of speaking was disturbingly impersonal. Most notably, she repeatedly referred to her 3-year-old daughter as it, instead of using she or her, treating the child more like an object than a person. This cold, detached behavior deeply troubled investigators, as it showed an alarming lack of maternal bond with her child. Though some people might explain her actions as symptoms of depression or other mental health issues, authorities concentrated on the serious nature of her neglectful behavior rather than considering potential excuses for her actions. In contrast, Rivera displayed an emotional response, appearing visibly distraught during the meeting. Witnesses recalled seeing him cry as he spoke with officials, but his reaction did little to shift the scrutiny away from him. Some questioned the sincerity of his distress, noting that he had not inquired about the well-being of his children. Despite his tears, he failed to express concern over their condition or ask where they had been taken. Given the severity of the case, authorities remained skeptical about the true extent of his involvement and whether he had deliberately ignored the horrors within his own home. During the ongoing legal investigation, police officers executed a search warrant on September 10, 2014. What they found was disturbing. 2 dead infants were discovered in a bedroom cupboard next to a deceased dog. They also found a 3rd infant's body hidden in a box in another bedroom. These horrific discoveries transformed what was initially an extreme neglect case into a suspected homicide investigation. When confronted with the discovery, Murray initially claimed all 3 babies were stillborn. She said all her children, including the 3 deceased infants and 2 living but neglected daughters, were born at home without medical care. She insisted that Rivera was unaware of their existence. However, her story shifted under further questioning. She later confessed that 1 infant had been born alive but died after a week. She described finding the baby unresponsive but still warm, yet made no attempt to seek emergency medical help or resuscitate the child. Her inaction raised disturbing questions about whether the infant could have survived with proper medical intervention. The discovery of the deceased infants only deepened the tragedy of the case. If the 3 babies had indeed been stillborn, it remained unclear why she had not sought proper burial or medical documentation for them. Instead, she had chosen to store their remains inside closets, a decision that suggested a complete disregard for human life. Additionally, the survival of the 2 youngest living children was nothing short of miraculous. Having been subjected to years of neglect, they had somehow endured despite their lack of nourishment, medical care, and human interaction. While the primary focus remained on the welfare of the children, the treatment of animals within the home also came under scrutiny. On August 28, 2014, animal control officers had responded to reports of neglect at the residence, leading them to remove a cat and a dog from the property. The animals, much like the children, had been suffering from extreme neglect. The dog was found to be severely malnourished, with large patches of missing fur, open wounds, and a visibly weakened frame. Veterinarians reported that its eyes were sunken due to starvation, and its body was covered in scabs and scars. Both the cat and dog were infested with fleas, which suggested that the entire house was teeming with parasites, a condition that further endangered the children living inside. When asked about how she treated the animals, Murray showed complete indifference, similar to her attitude toward her children. She acknowledged her inability to provide proper care, but didn't explain why she continued keeping the animals despite their poor conditions. During the welfare check and arrests, investigators observed that Murray seemed more worried about finding her missing cat than about what would happen to her children. Her apparent lack of concern strengthened the prosecution's case that she had acted intentionally and showed no regret for her actions. As investigators collected more forensic evidence from the home, the charges against her became increasingly severe. The evidence revealed a disturbing behavior of long-term abuse, including severe child neglect, several dead infants, and animal cruelty. Rather than viewing her as a mother, prosecutors portrayed her as someone who deliberately concealed and endangered her children. Each new discovery intensified public outrage, and the subsequent trial would expose even more horrifying details. During their investigation, authorities reviewed previous complaints about the home and discovered a disturbing history of neglect that had been ignored for years. One significant incident occurred more than 2 years before the welfare check that revealed the horrific conditions inside. At that time, a neighbor had reported suspected animal cruelty after seeing a dog left outside in freezing weather without food. While police responded and removed the dog, they never inspected the inside of the house or investigated further. Investigators now believe this was a huge mistake. A thorough inspection then could have exposed the children's abuse much sooner. The neglect inside the home was finally discovered through an unexpected source. When a Blackstone Board of Health Code Enforcement officer arrived to inspect the property, they uncovered conditions far worse than anyone could have imagined. The house was in such a horrific state of disrepair and filth that it was declared uninhabitable on the spot. Interior photographs revealed extreme unsanitary conditions, crumbling infrastructure, and pest infestations throughout. The contamination was so extensive that officials deemed the property beyond repair. The only solution was to tear down the house completely, preventing any future occupancy. A cleaning crew spent 4 days cleaning the home before demolition could begin. Workers wearing protective equipment worked over 90 hours removing toxic materials and biohazards. The house was in terrible condition, with a pervasive odor that had penetrated the walls and surfaces covered in garbage, human waste, and rotting materials. The city of Blackstone paid the $30,000 bill for cleanup and demolition, which angered residents who wondered why such severe neglect had gone unreported and why taxpayers had to pay for one household's negligence. After being removed from their home, the 2 youngest children entered foster care. Medical evaluations revealed the severe impact of their neglect. The 3-year-old's condition was particularly concerning. Her muscles had deteriorated significantly, feeling soft and weak from disuse. Unlike other children her age who could walk and explore independently, she couldn't even sit up without help. This severe neglect had dramatically impaired her physical development, leaving her far behind the typical milestones for a child of her age. Upon further evaluation, the child showed clear signs of severe neglect. She wouldn't make eye contact and would rock back and forth to comfort herself. When confronted with unfamiliar situations or people, she would curl up into a ball, a typical reaction seen in neglected children. Medical staff observed her unusual fascination with lights, likely because she had spent long periods in darkness. Since she didn't speak or interact with others, she was first thought to be nonverbal, and some specialists suggested she might have autism. However, experts warned against rushing to diagnose her, explaining that long-term neglect can look similar to developmental disorders. They concluded that an accurate diagnosis would only be possible after she received consistent care in a safe, supportive environment. Along with her developmental issues, Her physical state was deeply concerning. She showed clear signs of severe neglect. Her body was marked by intense diaper rash from being left in dirty diapers for long periods. Her hair was matted and dirty, and her ears were blocked with wax buildup. Most disturbingly, doctors found a maggot in her right ear, revealing the extremely unhygienic conditions she had lived in. Medical experts determined that this prolonged neglect had caused serious physical and emotional damage that would require years of treatment and recovery. The 5-month-old baby sister was somewhat healthier, but also showed clear signs of neglect. She could make eye contact and occasionally smile at doctors, indicating less psychological trauma than her 3-year-old sister. However, what concerned doctors most was her complete silence. Healthy babies typically cry and make sounds to get attention, but she remained quiet. Doctors believed she had learned that crying was pointless since no one would respond, causing her to stop altogether. Though her situation wasn't as severe as her sister's, she would still need extensive support to overcome her developmental and emotional challenges. The two children reacted very differently to their neglect, highlighting how damaging long-term abandonment can be. The older child had shut down emotionally after years of isolation, while the younger one hadn't developed such severe defensive behaviors yet. This suggested that getting help early could make a real difference in the younger child's recovery. The specialists treating these children stressed that healing would be a long process, requiring extensive therapy and support. The children had missed out on crucial human contact, developmental activities, and health care. Though doctors could treat their physical problems from malnutrition and neglect, healing the emotional trauma would be a much longer journey. As details emerged about the children's severe neglect, the public grew increasingly outraged that such abuse could go unnoticed for years. People found it particularly hard to believe that Rivera, their father, claimed no knowledge of his children's suffering within his own home. Investigators focused heavily on determining whether he had deliberately turned a blind eye to the abuse or had been genuinely unaware of the situation. The prosecution prepared to try both parents, determined to secure justice for the children who had endured years of extreme neglect. As the trial date approached, medical evaluations conducted before the trial revealed the severe consequences of neglect on the children. The 5-month-old baby's condition was particularly alarming, as she showed none of the typical behaviors expected at her age. While most infants cry when hungry, uncomfortable, or frightened, she was disturbingly quiet. She neither moved her legs nor grabbed objects, and doctors discovered unusual muscle rigidity in her arms, resulting from extended periods of immobility and insufficient physical interaction. Tests showed that both children suffered from dangerous deficiencies in vitamin D and albumin, evidence that they had been kept away from sunlight and denied adequate nutrition for a long time. After entering foster care, the children showed dramatic positive changes in response to their new caring environment. The 3-year-old girl's progress was particularly striking. She had been so neglected that she couldn't even sit up on her own, but within 2 weeks of receiving proper care and attention, she achieved a major milestone, taking her first steps. This quick improvement revealed that her delayed development was due to severe neglect rather than permanent physical limitations. Her remarkable recovery demonstrates how resilient young children can be and shows how essential basic care and attention are for child development. The younger child made promising progress in her recovery. Initially showing no response to her surroundings, she gradually began interacting with her caregivers by making eye contact and smiling. She also started making small sounds, breaking her concerning silence that had resulted from neglect. Medical experts noted that while both children still faced a long recovery process, their improvement showed how children can heal when provided proper care and support. The legal case advanced when prosecutors charged Erika Murray with 2 counts of second-degree murder on December 16, 2014. Evidence showed that while one infant was stillborn, investigators determined 2 others were born alive, but died from neglect. Murray faced charges only for the 2 living births, not the stillborn infant. Supporting evidence included finding one infant wrapped in adult sweatpants with the placenta and umbilical cord still attached, indicating the baby never received medical attention. In addition to the murder charges, she was also charged with 2 counts of assault and battery for abusing her surviving children, plus 2 counts of animal cruelty for neglecting the family's pets. Prosecutors claimed she had caused unnecessary suffering to all 4 children, though to varying degrees. While the 2 older children weren't kept in isolation like their siblings, they still lived in severely unsanitary conditions. The house was so contaminated that it couldn't be salvaged and had to be torn down. Raymond Rivera, however, was not charged in connection to the deaths or neglect of the children. While prosecutors concluded he had no knowledge of the additional children in the home, some doubted this claim. He was ultimately charged only with marijuana possession and intent to distribute, charges that appeared to be a way to secure some form of punishment. His defense argued that because he was confined to the basement, he had minimal awareness of activities occurring in the rest of the house. His insistence that he had been unaware of the filth, decay, and suffering inside the house was met with widespread disbelief. His claim that he had spent nearly all of his time in the basement failed to explain how he had remained oblivious to the overwhelming stench that neighbors had reported noticing from outside the home. Investigators questioned how he could have walked through the house daily without detecting the visible signs of extreme neglect. His argument that he had never seen any indication of pregnancy in his partner, despite having been present for her 2 previous births, only further eroded his credibility. As the trial commenced on June 4, 2019, the prosecution presented evidence to support the claim that 2 of the infants had been born alive before their deaths. Both had been found dressed in diapers and newborn outfits, suggesting that someone had initially cared for them before they died. Due to the extent of decomposition, forensic experts could not determine the exact causes of death, but the condition of the bodies supported the theory that they had been alive for a period of time. During the trial, Betsy Brown, the neighbor who had alerted authorities, took the stand. Overcome with emotion, she described the horror of discovering the conditions inside the home. She recounted seeing baby bottles filled with maggots and struggling to comprehend how such suffering had gone unnoticed for so long. Her testimony painted a devastating picture of the reality within the house, reinforcing the prosecution's argument that Murray had knowingly subjected her children to inhumane conditions. The prosecution also highlighted the stark contrast in how Murray had treated her older and younger children. While the 2 eldest had been allowed to attend school and experience a degree of normalcy, the younger children had been deliberately hidden away, deprived of even the most basic care. The case raised difficult questions about intent, mental health, and the limitations of the justice system in holding individuals accountable for extreme neglect. As the trial progressed, the outcome remained uncertain, leaving many to wonder whether justice would be served for the children who had suffered in silence for so long. The prosecution further argued that Murray had created 2 separate realities for her children, one for those she wanted and another for those she did not. The older children had been born in hospitals, seen by doctors, and covered by insurance, whereas the younger ones had been born in secret, kept without birth records, and hidden away in dark rooms, completely isolated from the world. Despite the differences in treatment, the prosecution emphasized that all the children had suffered neglect, as even the older children had been forced to live in a home overrun with filth and vermin. While they may not have endured the same level of isolation, they too had been subjected to unacceptable conditions. The defense attempted to shift the narrative, arguing that Murray's mental health impairments had impacted her ability to distinguish right from wrong. They claimed she had been unable to fully comprehend the harm her actions had caused, a position that the prosecution strongly contested. If she had truly lacked awareness, they argued, why had she gone to such lengths to hide the existence of the younger children? The act of secrecy itself demonstrated an understanding that what she was doing was wrong. Further, she had fabricated an entire persona, creating a fake Facebook account and inventing a woman named Michelle Ridgway to support her deception. Such deliberate actions, the prosecution asserted, pointed to calculated manipulation rather than cognitive impairment. To support their claims, the defense presented testimony from Dr. Judith Edersheim, a forensic psychiatrist, who argued that Murray's cognitive function was severely compromised. She described a combination of pre-existing and external factors that allegedly impaired her decision-making abilities, resulting in what she called peculiar judgment. The psychiatrist explained that Murray's relatively low IQ and deficits in working memory created an inflexible and limited mental framework, preventing her from processing her situation rationally. Additionally, she diagnosed Murray with a combination of avoidant and dependent personality disorders, which she claimed contributed to her inability to confront problems directly. According to the defense, Murray's fear of abandonment by her boyfriend led her to conceal her pregnancies rather than seeking outside help. Despite these claims, many remained unconvinced. The prosecution pushed back, arguing that Murray's actions were not the result of rigid thinking, but deliberate choices. She had maintained her lies for years, ensuring that no one discovered the existence of the hidden children. The calculated nature of her deception, from keeping the infants locked away to maintaining an elaborate false narrative online, contradicted the defense's assertion that she was simply too impaired to make rational decisions. The defense also argued that Rivera had exerted coercive and financial control over Murray, isolating her and limiting her access to resources. They claimed he had forced her to leave her job and prevented her from driving, making her completely dependent on him. Witnesses stated that he belittled her, threatened to leave her, and reinforced her fear of abandonment. While these allegations painted him as a controlling partner, the prosecution maintained that they did not absolve Murray of responsibility for her actions. She had previously held a job and had access to family support before withdrawing from those relationships. At no point had she attempted to seek help for herself or her children. On June 20th, 2019, after years of legal proceedings, the verdict was delivered. Despite the overwhelming evidence of neglect, Murray was found guilty only of 2 counts of assault and battery on her children, along with 2 counts of animal cruelty. She was acquitted of all other charges, including the second-degree murder charges. The decision was based largely on the argument that the prosecution had failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Murray had directly caused the deaths of the infants. The outcome of the trial sparked widespread public outrage. Many felt that justice had not been served, particularly given the severity of the neglect and the deaths that had occurred within the home. The leniency of the verdict raised difficult questions about how the legal system handles cases of extreme child neglect and the extent to which mental health considerations should influence criminal liability. While Murray was sentenced for her role in the suffering of her surviving children, the fact that she was not held accountable for the deaths of the infants left many feeling that the justice system had failed those who had been silenced before they even had a chance to live. On July 11, 2019, with Murray receiving a sentence of 6 to 8 years in prison, 4 to 5 years for assault and battery, and an additional 2 to 3 years for animal cruelty. The ruling was met with disbelief, as many felt the sentence was far too lenient given the severity of the case. Judge Kenton Walker justified the sentence by stating that she could only impose penalties based on the charges Murray had been convicted of, not on the public's perception of her broader actions. Judge Janet Kenton Walker ruled that despite the horrific discovery of 3 dead infants, she could not find Erika Murray guilty of murder. The judge explained that prosecutors failed to provide enough evidence, particularly forensic proof, to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Murray was responsible for killing the infants. As a result, she dismissed the most serious charges against Murray. Having already served 5 years in custody, Murray was left with only 2 to 3 years remaining on her sentence, leading to further outrage. Her attorney argued that she could have been released that very day, and he pushed for an even lighter sentence, requesting probation for the animal cruelty charges and less than 18 months for the assault and battery charges. The defense contended that mental illness had played a significant role in Murray's actions and that a prolonged sentence would not serve justice. Murray later filed a motion for reconsideration, which was denied, and subsequently appealed her sentence. Blackstone's police chief issued a statement acknowledging the difficulty of the case and the lasting impact on the affected children. He expressed hope that the community could find closure, but many believed true justice had not been served. The children, particularly the older ones, would carry the trauma of their experiences for the rest of their lives, knowing what their mother had been capable of. The leniency of the sentence led to a broader debate about how the justice system handles cases of extreme neglect, with many arguing that the punishment failed to reflect the true gravity of the crimes.